It came up probably media-wise or publicly near the deadline because we weren't talking about it a lot publicly. We were discussing a lot of things with his representation team for the last month or so. As I told you, probably at the start of the summer, we were going to address it at the appropriate time. And as the process unfolded, clearly a lot of activity happened late. A lot of maybe deals that weren't expected happened last minute, including Taj Gibson, I think 7 minutes before the deadline. But it's not really a surprise to us based on some of the progress that we were making in those discussions throughout the process.
What was the rationale for it? To get cost certainty going forward? Walk us through the thought process to do it.
Yeah, I would say that, first of all, DeMar's a young talent. He's a hard worker. He's been developing and progressing to a level that we felt he's an asset, and we wanted to retain the asset. So this is mostly about asset retention. And yes, it does lock in an asset moving forward. But as far as some of the talk or discussion about we've lost some of our flexibility, we really haven't. In our opinion, this is somewhat of a cap neutral deal because going forward, had we issued a qualifying offer or dealt with that next summer in terms of going into restricted free agency, you basically have a scenario where there's a cap hold, and the cap hold is a little bit higher than the actual qualifying offer. So in effect, the cap hold was a number that was very near the number, at or near the number that we ultimately settled on. And the talk about the size of the deal, we feel like he slotted in exactly where we felt he ultimately would. You saw all the deals unfold yesterday. You saw, obviously, Blake Griffin early on. James Harden happened a little bit later in the day. The Ty Lawson deal was something that we expected. Drew Holiday just north of where DeMar was. The unknown was, or the one that we weren't sure was Brandon Jennings. We weren't sure where that one was going to end up. And also, with Steph Curry, there was some uncertainty, and I think it was related mostly to the uncertainty of his injury. So I don't want to comment necessarily on the other deals, but we felt it played out, this market played out exactly as we had anticipated. So
would there be concerns about poison pill offer next summer or the new CBA? How does that impact the new CBA and its tax issues impact what you do?
Well, we're a team that operated below the cap last year, so this year we basically could only go so far above the cap number, almost making it impossible to get to the tax threshold. But I'm charged with making this team better and acquiring assets or retaining assets, and we've successfully retained an asset now. With respect to the poison pill provision, yes, it does affect a player's value in a trade going out, and again, we feel that DeMar's a piece that we want with us moving forward. So we're viewing it in a model that we've got certain flexibility going into the summer, not much as it relates to cap plays, but going into the trade deadline this year, we still have an enormous amount of flexibility that I think we've pointed out and discussed before. The following year, there will be, no cap space basically to speak of, but the year following, I think it's the 14-15 year season is something that, right now we've got tremendous flexibility. And again, you've got to keep this thing rolling in a pattern of, acquiring pieces that you think are pieces of a puzzle. We've been developing this thing. This is a plan that we've been working on, and this is the next step. This is, and the timing of it is something that we decided it was the appropriate time to act.
Along those lines, with the way restricted free agency played out last summer, I'm thinking of Eric Gordon, Batum, and Hibbert. Is that something that you just didn't want to approach with him if he had an excellent year as you expect him to?
Well, clearly the downside of free agency and the unknown of free agency is, despite it being restricted free agency, is that his value would have gone up even further. Again, with all the due diligence that we did and with all the information that I'm privy to, we feel like this is at or near where he would have been next year. And the only downside of waiting would have been that someone would have come in, and there's roughly 14 teams right now that you can count with significant cap space depending on certain things happening. That number may have altered a little bit yesterday with a couple of these deals that were just signed. But the fact of the matter is there's roughly 10 teams, let's say, that will have significant cap space and would have been potential suitors for a dynamic wing player like DeMar DeRozan. And by getting this taken care of now, we've secured him at a number that we feel is the right value. And again, based on due diligence, based on where we see DeMar today and where we see him in the future, we feel the value of the deal is the appropriate deal. So we acted on it.
What kind of message do you think this sends to DeMar in terms of expectations you have for him going forward?
Well, DeMar is a young player that obviously has worked very hard on his game, and he's always expressed an interest in being here. He really likes Toronto. I think he appreciates the way the organization has treated him, the way the fans have treated him. Again, if you look, it's kind of interesting, but he played 1 year of college basketball and he's played 3 seasons with us. So arguably, he's spent his formidable college years with us. We've grown with him. He's grown with us. We see him as a piece that, not only do we want him, but he wants to be here, and that's important to me, and that's important to this organization. And I think it's an important message to send that we've got a nice fit, and that we want to retain our players that work hard and show signs of promise. And we feel by no means has he reached his ceiling. Upside is a commodity in this business, and we definitely think that this was a wise investment. But the message to DeMar is that we see him as a keeper.
Coach spoke about DeMar's character, his work ethic. How do those things make it an easier decision to invest in a player like DeMar?
I place a lot of value on character, and DeMar has clearly handled himself well as a professional here, and a young professional. Again, he came here at the age of 19, if I'm not mistaken, and again, young at the time, immature at the time, but always handled himself really well and always worked through some of the early struggles of being a rookie in the league, and then the second year following that up. And he's progressed at a very, good pace. We see practice every day. We see the games. We know the results. We know the box score stats, and we know the advanced analytic stats. And again, we see that DeMar is someone that has done a lot in a short period of time, and it has a much higher ceiling to achieve even more. And that's where, when this extension kicks in, we feel that it'll be well within market.
DeMar and Landry now sign long term. How does Terrence fit in? Obviously, you invested a high pick, think really highly of him. How does he fit in with?
Again, I would say that Terrence is another asset. We talked about taking the best player. We talked about taking a player that was going to add something to this team. We see that happening. I don't know how quickly. It's a lot to ask a coach to play one rookie, much less two. And right now, Jonas is getting the bulk of the minutes, albeit, inexperience right now is probably the thing holding both of those players back. But, Jonas is getting the better opportunity right now. With players ahead of Terrence right now, it'll be, some time before we know the true impact. But I wouldn't gauge, and I try to always remind people, this is not an instant gratification business. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes things take time to develop, but we talk about the concept of stacking talent, asset acquisition, asset retention, having pieces to, sometimes develop into contributors, and sometimes develop pieces that will ultimately turn into opportunities to improve your team other ways. And again, having the ability to have depth at pretty much every position this year, Terrence included at the wing position, is certainly something that we feel very good about. The depth of this team is one of the strong suits, and I think you're going to see that come into play quite often this year as we're trying to win basketball games.